Hello, it's Garnet here, and I'd like to talk to you about why I love the brain gym in the Neurolite. The brain gym. I think, as you understand, the Neurolite has three interrelated aspects: brain gym, brain food, brain skills. And the brain food is a separate device. That's the one that goes in the nose. In the Neurolite itself, you have what's called the brain gym and brain skills. I want to talk about the brain gym and why I love it so much. A rough analogy that I've oftentimes given is that the brain gym, like its name, gym, is where you go and do specific exercises for your brain. These exercises in general have two possible interrelated goals. One is to build up your brain fitness, what's technically called your neuroplastic capacity, kind of your brain vitality, or you could say fitness following the gym analogy. In this area of building your vitality, your fitness in your brain, your capacity, you can also use the brain gym to not just build from a lower level to a higher level, but once you've reached a level that is adequate, a level that is working for you, the second aspect is not just to build, but to maintain. And that's where we call the maintaining the brain tonics. All of this is in the Neurolite Practical Guide for Beginners. It's a document, it's yours, it's free. If you don't have it, send a request to theneurolite@gmail.com and I'll send it to you. This is also something that your Neurolite ambassador should be giving to you and working with it as you learn all of your basic skills. So anyway, the brain gym, the analogy that the brain skills, you can think of it as brain school, brain skills. In this analogy, it's like a sport. I always say it's like playing tennis. So the brain skills is where you take a level of capacity that you have, your fitness, and then you apply that to learning new skills. In this analogy, a new sport, let's say tennis. So adjusting your demand that comes in playing the sport to the capacity that you have to make it possible to play the sport. Okay, that's the analogy. Now let's go looking more closely at the brain gym and why I say I love it, and some insights as to how to use it. Let's say that you're working in the gym, but you're working with weights. I'm using a couple of mixed analogies here. You know, one day you can work on your legs, and then the next day maybe you work on your back, and then the next day maybe your arms, and then the next day after that maybe your abs, and then either another day, a fifth day. But the idea is then you take a few days off so that the muscles can catch up, so that you can integrate. Those are usually called rest days. You can do the very, very same thing with the brain gym. And I'm going to separate the brain gym, and I think I'll do this video in two parts, because the brain gym has got specific exercises: coordination, flexibility, endurance, and strength. And it also has another section, the brain network reinforcement. So let's say right now, let's divide the brain gym into two: the specific exercises and the networks. And I'll talk about the networks in part 2 of this video. Okay, to the exercises. You'll see that there are 4 exercises. One is coordination, then flexibility, endurance, and strength. Flexibility, endurance, strength. So the first one, coordination. These are terms from physical somatic exercise of the whole body. But remember, your brain is physical. There's nothing that you can do with your body that you're not doing with your brain. So these terms are not just kind of analogies from somatic exercise, they also apply to the brain. So what is coordination? That exercise. That's the exercising in the degree of change. Foundation, intermediate, advanced. You can say, level 1, level 2, level 3. It's the ability to make a change by some degree. Imagine a simple dance step, and you can make 1 2 3 3 2 1 1 2 3, but what about 1 3 5 7 1 3 5 7 1 3 5 7 9 12? So the coordination exercise exercises your brain's ability to make change by degree, increasing degree. The flexibility is not simply the degree of change, but the degree of complexity in the change. Going from a waltz step to maybe a tango to a jitterbug. I'm using, rough analogy images, but you get the idea that there is also complexity in change. It's just not the degree in a simple linear sense. It's also the degree of complexity. How complicated is that signaling? And we need to exercise that. Then you've got that endurance, which is not just the degree, not the complexity, but the rate. You can learn a dance step slowly, but then can you do it faster, and even faster than that? Lastly is the strength, and that's the intensity of the signal. And the intensity here in this exercise can easily be translated by the degree of brightness in the light. And in general, you've got that slide bar, but also within every composition, you'll have increasing and decreasing degrees of light intensity. So that's the strength of the signal. Now, I think you're aware that in the brain gym, when you focus on the exercises, like going to yoga class, you can choose a beginner's class, an intermediate class, or an advanced class. And it's like that with the exercises. So you've got 4 types of exercises, right? Coordination, flexibility, endurance, and strength. But let's say you do the coordination. You can go to a beginner's class, an intermediate class, or an advanced class to practice your coordination or your agility. Same thing with flexibility. That's more like the yoga thing, I guess. Stretching. Beginner stretching, intermediate stretching, advanced stretching. So you have this area, and I guess the simplest thing that you have to consider is which one do I need, and at what level of demand should I do it. Now here's a very simple way, because we have a bunch of assessment techniques. You can listen to those videos, you can read about it, but the simple thing is, when you do it, when you're in the session, and it's a light and sound session, you'll notice that the sound is rather more neutral. There are signals in the sound, but there's a lot of neutrality. There's not a lot of mood framing, because I don't want to take the brain into some kind of skill learning process. I want to keep the brain working at an exercise level. So, in the gym, you kind of focus without a lot of distraction. That's the same thing in the Neurolight Brain Gym. So here's a very simple but profound way of knowing what you're doing. It's whether when you do the session, let's say that you're doing intermediate flexibility. You say, well, is intermediate the right one? Should I be doing foundation? Should I be doing advanced? Well, you always err on the conservative side. You always err on the conservative side. But I can tell you simply that when you're having the light sound experience, are you able to maintain clarity? Are you able to be attentive? Not necessarily alerted. It's not vigilant. It's just, can you be there? For example, right now, you're looking and listening to me. Are you able to be attentive? Can you stay with it? Or do you start to slide? And even more than that, do you check out? That's that thing that we've talked about in other videos that seems like falling asleep, but is actually not falling asleep. if you can maintain a simple, clear attention during the 11 minutes, and you don't drift or drowse or check out, that means that, generally speaking, you are able to match a capacity to that demand. So you can just try and see what that's like, and that's going to be a very good guide for you. Now, here are a couple of tricks. You've got to be careful that you don't have the light intensity too low, or most importantly too high, because that's going to falsely demand that you maintain that clear attention during the process. So be careful that you have the light intensity at like an average, comfortable state. The other is, if you decide to sequence them, and you may notice that you're there for the first 11 minutes, but for the second 11 minutes, you're having a harder time maintaining that clarity of attention, that's also an indicator that your demand levels by more time might be not enough to match the capacity that you have, or the other way around, right? That your capacity can't quite match that demand. So this is simple. This is pretty straight ahead. Now understand this thing about checking out or going asleep or lack of attention. If you just happen to be super tired because it's the end of the day or you've been working too hard, you know, that's a false report. The measure doesn't work. You've got to go into it feeling pretty good. You've got to go into it feeling, I would say, reasonably good. Now, I really recommend that you spend time in the brain gym, even if you feel like your brain vitality or fitness is fine, because it's at that brain tonic level that you also get benefit, right? That maintaining a level of neuroplastic capacity, so that when you do go into learning a new sport, let's say you shift from tennis to handball or to basketball or something, to use these analogies, each of these different skill sets have a different quality or type of demand. So if you stop doing your basic exercise, you might find it hard to integrate some of the skills. To finish up, in the document, the Neurolite Practical Guide for Beginners, notice it's beginners, there are full programs on how to use the brain gym, the exercises that I've just described, as well as the brain network reinforcements that I'll be talking about in this next part 2. So I hope that gives you some clarity. I really appreciate the brain gym exercises. They may not be very exciting. They may not be very exciting in the sense that you're not going to have, big wow, sort of light colored geometric synedetic visions, and that's really not the point. You can have those excited or fascinating or alluring states when you go into the brain skills, sometimes quite reliably. But the idea is, don't miss out on the fact that building your neuroplastic capacity, your brain fitness, your brain vitality is a very satisfying experience. And the satisfaction is in all likelihood not measured during the light and sound. I keep on making this point in general, and especially for the brain gym. When you're doing a basic exercise in the gym, it may not be the most fun thing in the world, and afterwards it's, but what you do notice is there's something accumulating. You may notice, best of all, a few hours later, it's like, oh, I feel good. I guess that, going to the gym was good for me. And especially over the course of a day or two, and most especially with some amount of regularity, you're going to be very pleased. Even if you don't spend a great deal of time in the brain skills, what I call the candy store, tongue-in-cheek, obviously they're amazing for what they do, but the brain gym should not be underappreciated. It can give you some of the most satisfying short-term, medium-term, and long-term results. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.